Привет. Перед началом видео хотел пожелать приятного просмотра.
The first story. Every time I stay at my grandma's house, I hear someone walking upstairs. It starts at one side of the room, casually walks to the other, and stops. This will happen maybe twice a night. I didn't start hearing it until I was about 14, when my grandparents made me start sleeping in a different room on the first floor, because they starting sleeping in separate bedrooms. Blah, blah, blah. Regardless, both of their rooms are also on the first floor. For a little backstory, I have always been afraid of the upstairs at their house. I don't know why, but it's always freaked me out. And I refuse to ever go up there alone. I'm 23 now. Still won't go up alone. There's one room specifically, though. It's a long, narrow bedroom. When you open the door, there are closets on your left and right, a bed placed roughly in the middle of the room, and a window on the far side opposite the door. I was told, growing up by my grandparents, that the sons of the previous owner claimed to see a gorilla come out of the closet at night, dance around the room, and go back into the closet. I thought nothing of this story until I had to start sleeping in the other room. The room located directly below the scary room upstairs. So, we all go to bed. All the lights in the house are off, and I'm still awake, lying on the bed. Then I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. Starting at one end of the room upstairs. It got closer to me, passed right above me, and continued to the end of the room, where it stopped. I'm wide awake, terrified out of my mind. It was no question to me that I had heard footsteps. I knew that slow, casual pace. I was freaked out and went to my grandpa's room. I told him what I heard. And it started again, this time from where it ended the first time, by the window upstairs. It walks over me again and stops when it reached the door. I thought it was over until 5 seconds later when I heard it coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence as it reached the landing. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, and silence again as it reached the first floor. I was frozen in shock. Whatever it was on my floor of the house, and long scratches down the front of the gun case door. I could even hear the door, ever so slightly, tapping against the frame as each scratch began. I tried to scream and I couldn't. I took a second to take a deep breath and let out a loud scream. In seconds, my grandpa made it to my room, and I was relieved. Needless to say, he still didn't believe me. So I did what any normal person would do. I draped a sheet over the side of the bed and slept underneath it. I wrapped myself tight in a comforter, put on headphones, and turned my back to the door. There could be a party of ghosts in my room, and I wouldn't even know. The next morning, my grandpa told my grandma about what happened the night before. She said, "Oh, that's silly. You know, your cousin woke me up the last time she stayed here, She came in my room saying, "I hear footsteps." I slept under the bed for the rest of my week stay with them. I've stayed there countless times since that happened, and I hear the footsteps every time. I sleep on top of the bed now, but keep my back to the door and sleep with headphones on. I haven't heard it come down the stairs since that first night. But if it does, I don't want to know. The second story. I was about 7. My 2 brothers and I were playing in a area that was used as an unofficial motocross place. We decided to dig a tunnel for some reason. Being the extra smart guys we were, it took a few hours to dig about 6 feet in and 2 feet high. I was right up at the face when suddenly the tunnel collapsed. It was all dirt with no supports. My world went instantly black and hot. By hot, I mean furnace hot. I couldn't move a muscle from the weight of the soil completely enclosing me. I started to really panic, as you do. Everything started turning red, which I guess was blood being forced into my head. Every breath was getting harder as the soil constrained me more and more. Even though my hands were near my face, I couldn't move my arms to clear the dirt around the total darkness, turning red with the incredible heat, made my young mind think I was going to hell. I don't know how long I was buried for, but it seemed like an eternity. Suddenly, I felt something grab one of my feet. My brothers had been frantically digging through the collapse to pull me out and managed to reach me and then pull me out. We never told my parents. I just went home and got hosed down. The third story. When we first moved into the house I grew up in, I used to hear things calling my name from the opposite end of the house. Like, I would be in my room playing with Legos or something, and I would hear my dad call my name from his room. So I'd go to my parents' bedroom and ask them what they wanted, and they'd always tell me that they never called my name. Being a little kid, I honestly started to think that they were playing a joke on me, because this happened about once every couple of days. Well, one night it happened, and I went to ask them what they wanted, like always. But right as I stepped into their room, I heard my mom's voice calling for me from the living room, which is all the way on the other side of the house. It was at that exact point that I knew no one was tricking me, because I was looking at both of my parents sitting in front of me. I kinda kept this to myself until my brother was diagnosed with partial narcolepsy. One of the symptoms of narcolepsy is apparently oral hallucinations. So I thought maybe I had it too. Went and got myself checked. Completely fine. So I have no idea what was calling my name all those years. And I still hear it at night, whenever I come visit and stay over. The fourth story. Okay, this is 100% true. I'm 23 now, and this happened about 10 years ago. So, I was probably 13 or 14. Anyway, I used to skateboard all the time with my friends Tim and Brandon. One day, We got done skating and we decided to go to 7-Eleven to get some food, drinks, before we went home. Remember, I was only 13, 14, so we weren't driving. We had skated to the 7-Eleven and were planning on skating, walking back home. Anyway, we buy our drinks and we left the store. We walked to the parking lot's exit and prepared to cross the highway. It's not a bust highway, since it's a small town. While we waited for the traffic light to turn red so that we could cross, I looked behind me at the 7-Eleven gas pumps. I noticed a 40 to 50-year-old man pumping gas into his white truck. He stared at me, and before I knew it, he dropped the gas pump and jumped into his truck. He missed us, but he grazed my arm and knocked my skateboard out of my hand. My friend Brandon screamed, "What the fuck, you fucking dick!" as the man peeled out and sped into the parking lot next to 7-Eleven. I swear to God, he drove through a ditch, which was between 7-Eleven's parking lot and the parking lot he was in, and tried to run us over again. This is where it got bad. The three of us started running at full speed across the highway and toward the local library, which is like 2 to 3 blocks from 7-Eleven. When we were about half a block away, I looked back and saw the maniac speeding toward us, full of rage. Brandon and Tim ran up to the library doors, and I ran towards the woods. It was Sunday, so I knew the library was closed, and there was a trail in the woods which led to my backyard. Meanwhile, this maniac peeled into the parking lot and hopped out of his truck. I looked behind me before escaping into the woods and saw him grab either a shotgun or a crowbar. I was pretty far away at this point, and I was freaking out, so my vision wasn't great. From the bed of his truck, I ran all the way home. When I got to my street, my neighbor, Tim's dad, told me to get in his car because we had to go to the video store, which is where Tim's mom worked. When I got there, I found Tim and Brandon. They ran to the video store after realizing that the library was closed, and 3 cops. A minute later, my mom came in, crying her eyes out, because Brandon and Tim told her they didn't know if I lived or not. Everyone had thought that I was captured. Tim told me that he saw the guy running after me into the woods, which is scary because I thought the maniac was chasing them, not me. Anyway, he was never caught, and I spent the next 5 years worrying about every white truck I saw. Smiley. Edit. I forgot the most scary part. My town is small, but it's not empty. There were plenty of people around. While this was going on, I felt so helpless, running for my life, while there were at least 100 people around, not doing a thing about it. Also, to be clear, we didn't provoke this man at all. He tried to hit us for no reason, and that's creepy. Brandon called him a dick, but that was after he tried to run us over. We were good kids, trying to walk home, and we almost died, got seriously hurt because of it. Also, bust highway equals busy highway. The 5th story. Not me, but my sister. So growing up, my sister had an imaginary friend. She said she was an older lady, and she was nice, and her name was E. She talked to her and played with her all that jazz until she was probably 4 or so, and then it stopped. Fast forward to when my sister was about 10. My mom isn't home. She got a call to go to the nursing home for GPA, so she bolts with Pops. My sister and I shared a room at the time, and she was in there doing whatever, and I was on the other end of the house. All of a sudden, I hear the radio in our room click on, turn all the way up, turn all the way down, and go off. This happened like 3 times, so I go in there to be all like, "What the fuck, kid? Knock him off!" And she is sitting in our room, just white as a ghost. I go over to the radio to unplug it. No plug. No batteries. Only radio in the house. I look at her, and she goes, "It was E. I saw her. It was E." So I call Mom, freaking out, and Mom is so upset. Apparently Grandpa had just passed away. Okay, weird, I drop incident, whatever. A few days later, at the funeral, a relative comes up to us and gives us a pic she found. My sister goes, "Hey, it's E." It was a pictures of my grandparents when they got married. My grandmother died before I was even thought of, when my mom was 11. We live in the home my mom grew up in. We have no pictures of her at all, as my step-grandmother got rid of them all when she moved into the house a few years after mom's death. The 6th story. I was in high school, doing homework at the dining room table. From there, I could see the front door. Our front door at the time had a 2 feet by 5 feet pane of glass in it, with a lace curtain over it. I remember hearing a noise, like somebody was on the porch. It was probably 9 p.m. or so. It was very dark outside, and the porch light wasn't on. As I'm watching the front door, I can see the screen door opening. It stands open for a minute or so, and there's nobody there, or they were dressed all in black. I'm frozen, waiting to see what happens next. The screen door just slowly closes. If someone was there, they didn't just let it go. Someone was closing it carefully so that it wouldn't make noise. After that, I don't remember if I heard footsteps. Maybe they saw me watching them and decided to quietly get out of there. The 7th story. Woke up. Clock says 3:34 a.m. I'm 17 and in my bedroom. It's pitch black, but I hear some rattling downstairs. Terrified, I quietly tiptoe to my parents' room. Weird. It's empty. Where are my parents at 3:34 a.m.? Go upstairs to my brother's room. He's usually awake all night, but while the light is on, no one is in the room. So I guess whatever those noises are downstairs, it must be them. Why are they awake? Maybe someone died? I go downstairs. In the middle of my living room is what looks like 2 men stealing our TV. No one else is in sight. I run upstairs as quietly as possible, shut and lock my door. Suddenly, there's banging on the door. I wake up. It was a dream and the relief washes over me. I look over at the clock. Weird coincidence. It's 3:34 a.m. I'm shaking, but decide to go downstairs to prove to myself that everything's fine. I go downstairs. The two men are in my kitchen, screaming at my parents and brother. I run upstairs to my bedroom and lock the door. 10 seconds later, I hear banging. I woke up. It's 3:34 a.m. This time, I had actually woken up, and I don't manage to fall back asleep for about 36 hours. The 8th story. I lived in a bizarre little house as a child. It was incredibly tall and thin, like an attached house, except freestanding, with 3 floors, a basement, and an attic. It was full of quirks, such as 2 fully functional fireplaces, a shower stall in the center of the basement, a backyard so small that you could not take 5 paces without hitting the fence, and an old-timey rope-pull dumbwaiter that led from the kitchen to my bedroom. I loved that weird little place, but unfortunately, it was incredibly old, and half of its charm was the fact that it seemed to have been designed by an inarticulate conclave of lunatics, and eventually the repair costs exceeded what my parents were willing to sink into it, and we had to move. Preparing for the move was a chore. I packed most of my stuff myself, and I had taken to throwing stuff down the dumbwaiter and shoving all my clothes so thickly in my closet that they became a single, solid brick of fabric. While clearing that closet out, in fact, I came across a feature I hadn't noticed before: an attic entrance in the roof. Being an adventurous kid, I opened her up, stood on the clothes brick, and began my first and last exploration into the topmost part of our weird little house. The first thing I noticed was that it wasn't as dark as it should have been. The place was strung with old red Christmas lights, which still burned with leftover incandescence, and a dozen little cracks and holes peeped down into all the bedrooms below. The second thing I noticed was that the place was set up for habitation. The insulation was plasticed away. There was an old gurney piled with sleeping bags and sheets, and a rusted mint green refrigerator, which still worked when I tested it. The third thing was the bones. There were a lot of bones. I was a kid at the time, with a limited understanding of anatomy, but there were bones of all types heaped into a series of piles around the center of the attic. Small and large, clean and white, from every and any imaginable sort of creature, haphazardly stacked in a half-dozen osseous clumps. 2 of them near blackened, as if someone had tried to burn them, and the walls nearest those blackened piles were scrawled in dark bone char messages. Mostly they were just smears, but the word sorry appeared more than once. That room had been sitting over my head for 8 years while I slept. The ninth story. So my uncle used to work a lot when I was younger. He's done a lot of different things to make money, but one consistent thing is that in the summer months and into late fall, he paints houses. It's a legitimate business and everything. He's got a truck with a number and a name and supplies in the back. The works. Every now and then, he would call my dad when he needed a little extra help, and I'd work for him. No big deal, really. It's just painting houses. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it takes a while to paint a whole house. If the weather conditions aren't right, then you can't paint. One particular fall was extremely wet. It rained what felt like every single day. My uncle would paint multiple houses at a time, so sometimes he would get caught up due to situations like these, and I'd work a little more than usual. The job wasn't hard, and it paid well. Anyway, it was a warm day for late fall, but there was still a distinct chill in the air. One that kind of penetrated through you and stung your soul. My uncle had this job he had to finish. It was an old Victorian house in a quiet part of town. A lady and her husband, who was an author, lived there. Due to the weather, it had taken longer than expected to paint the house, and there were family issues going on at the time, which further complicated things. So, my uncle gets a call one day from the lady who lives at the house. She says that her husband is trying to write his next book, but he keeps getting distracted by the scaffolding outside the house. So she wanted to know if we could come over and finish the job as soon as possible. My uncle was always an honest businessman. They had contracted him to do the job in midsummer, but he had lots of jobs that summer, and the wet conditions I mentioned above made it difficult to finish anything. However, these people were insistent but really polite, and not wanting to lose customers or get a bad recommendation. My uncle decided to put the house as a high priority. After all, it would only take a day or two to finish. So we show up to this house mid-afternoon. Like I said, it was a weird, kinda chilly that day. And I also remember a really eerie calm. The day was slightly overcast, so everything was shrouded in gray. It was like the perfect setting for a mystery crime novel. So we arrive at this house, and my uncle and I move to the back. The front of the house was already done, so there was nothing left there. My uncle, being the more experienced painter, would always do the touch-ups, and I would simply apply the first coats, since they took little skill. Anyway, we get to the back of the house, and he asks me if I'm scared of heights. I was 17 at the time, and although they do creep me out a little, I didn't want to seem like a child in front of my uncle, so I told him I wasn't. He was happy to hear that. He has me climb up the scaffold to the third floor to finish an upper section of the house. There was a window up there, a small little oval one that looked into the attic. The attic also happened to be the husband's study. He would do most of his writing in there. So, I'm climbing up this scaffolding, cans of paint dangling behind me, and various paintbrushes and other tools in the utility belt my uncle let me borrow. I get to the top of the scaffolding and set all my supplies down. I crack open a can of paint and start painting like I had a few hundred times before. Outside of the temperature, the overcast, and the eerie calm, this day was like any other. I'm working my way across the top part of the house when I get to the window that looks into the study. I bend down, dip my paintbrush, and stand back up to paint above the window. The window was in my direct line of sight, and I couldn't help gazing in. I see a man, the husband, staring back at me with a face completely barren of any emotion. I had never seen a face so devoid of feeling before. I still haven't. Of course, I get startled and take a step back. I chuckle and smile at the guy, but he doesn't smile back. Instead, while remaining completely emotionless, he draws a pistol up to his head that he was holding in his hand the whole time, and proceeds to blow his brains out without every breaking eye contact, right in front of me, while I'm staring at him. In utter shock, only I stepped back a step too much and fell off the scaffolding. Alerted by the gunshot, my uncle looked up in just enough time to see me fall off the scaffolding from the third story. I was lucky enough to land in a bush and only suffer a broken ankle and a few scratches. The biggest wounds happened in my head. I had to go to counseling for a while. It's been years since then, and I still remember that man's face. I've never forgotten it. It will always be burned in the back of my head. I know why, looking back. His face was so devoid of emotion, because he never felt any emotion at all. He literally didn't care about what he was doing. As it turns out, the man was seriously depressed and facing marital issues with his wife, combined with a few too many nights drunk on whiskey and facing writer's block. I guess he decided he couldn't take it anymore. His wife moved out of the house shortly after, and we never finished the job. To this day, that house remains abandoned, and to this day, I try not to drive down the street it's on. I'm scared that if I do, and happen to pass the backyard, I'll see that man staring back at me from that window, cold and emotionless. The 10th story. I always seem to get to these threads when my story will surely be buried. But here goes. When I was 13, my grandmother was dying of cancer, and my mother and I stayed at her house and took care of her during her last few weeks. One night, at 3 or so in the morning, my mother ran into my room and told me that my grandmother, who was by this time completely bedridden, entered my mother's room, woke her up, and then walked out of the room. There was no creepiness at the time, just a genuine concern for what my grandmother could possibly be doing up at 3 a.m. when she was literally days away from dying. We ran into her room, and sure enough, she had passed away. Obviously, given the shock of my grandmother dying, my mother and I didn't sit around chatting about how weird the whole experience was. But months, or perhaps even years later, I asked her about that night, and she has no memory of telling me that my grandmother was up and walking around the house. She doesn't even remember what woke her up or why she woke me up. Gives me shivers just writing it. The 11th story. When I was 8, my family moved from urban South Florida to a really small town in North Florida. It was like from a Goosebumps book. A lot of weird stuff has happened in the 15 years since we moved there. But the weirdest has got to be when my sister moved back in with my parents. My sister's husband had been shipped off to Afghanistan, so she was left alone with a newborn son, not wanting to go through the soul-crushing loneliness of raising a newborn all alone in a trailer in the woods. She moved back into my parents' house for a while. She said it started first when the headboard of her bed would slam every now and then. Then one day, she woke up because somebody was tickling her. She didn't really think about it until one night, she woke my mom up by screaming. My sister's almost 30. She's not a little kid. And my mom went in, and the whole bed was rocking and shaking. Like, really violently, up, down, to the sides, like a boat going through white water. But my mom and sister have been through a lot so they persevered. One night, my sister was nursing her son, and something grabbed her ponytail and started yanking her head around. My mom went in the room and very sternly, like talking to a bad kid, said, "I understand things are different. There's a little baby here, and there never has been before. You're curious, I understand that. But you will not touch them anymore. You can look, you can stay. You were here before us. But I swear to God, you are not allowed to touch them." It stopped happening. The 12th story. About a month ago, I went over to my girlfriend's house. Except I felt really uneasy when I went into the living room. Turns out, they replaced a china cabinet with one of her grandmothers, whom passed away a few months back. Her grandmother was bedridden in the hospital, and I've ever gotten to meet her. I felt uneasy the whole time. Being around her grandmother's furniture made me so anxious and almost sad. When I told her, she said it was probably nothing. She went to the bathroom. When I went over to the cabinet, it was about 6 feet tall. Dark wood. It had 2 doors on the side and glass up front. And in the back was a mirror. I was looking at the teacups and small baby dolls when I could swear I saw someone in the mirror behind me. Just a silhouette. I called out to my girlfriend. But as I did, I heard a shrill screech from the bathroom. I start pounding on the door, and it opens. She was sitting on the floor, crying. She said she saw someone in the bathroom mirror. We booked it out of her house. No shoes, no jacket, nothing, and right to my car. I dove for an hour or so with no destination. Just a lot to say. Filled small baby dolls, when we could swear I saw someone in the mirror behind me. Just a silhouette, and right to my car. I dove for an hour or so, with no destination. Do anything won't. When I returned her to her house, her mom was sitting on the doorstep. She said she kept seeing shadows move. Nope, I will go out of my way to make things like this happen. Someone claims their house is haunted. I want to see. Someone said they think they saw a skinwalker. My friends are looking. I've never found anything. But this was something else.
Подпишись на канал, поставь лайк и напиши в комментариях, что думаешь по поводу этих историй.